Joining me now, Niger Innes. He's the national spokesman for the Congress of Racial Equality and executive director of the TeaParty.net, and political analyst Zerlina Maxwell. First of all, I love that we can have this conversation about sort of bigger picture issues, not necessarily because of politics, but in this political atmosphere. Niger, why don't I start with you? Interesting to see that those three politicians, they're kind of like a microcosm of the country, everyone with a different perspective. How do we get on the same page, though? And how do we deal with what everyone seems to, even the three of us, acknowledge as a serious problem for our nation?
Well, I think it's most important that if we have a dialogue, that it be a really open and brutally honest dialogue that takes political correctness and actually flushes it down the toilet and says, well, look, let's look at what the real crisis is. You know, I've said this for a couple of decades, that there is a black genocide that is taking place among young black men. But when you consider the number of black men that lose their lives to policemen is, you know, a little over 100. But the number of young black men that lose their lives to other young black men is in the thousands, sometimes 5,000 to 6,000 a year. You have to ask yourself the question, if there is a genocide and a crisis with young black men and a crisis of black masculinity and how it's projected in media and entertainment and the like, what really is the source of that crisis? It's not racist white cops.
Zerlina, it's really interesting to hear his thoughts. I'm curious if you agree. And then also talk about this need for honesty. I mean, that is not easy. It's painful. It brings up a lot of things. It exposes a lot of truths about ourselves.
Right. Well, I think part of the conversation gets distracted when we talk about black on black crime, because I think that we're ignoring the fact that black people that kill other black people, they go to jail, right? The justice system is in place to punish those people who commit crimes. In this case, though, it's a unique situation where it's not partisan. It's not something where left or right, you take a position. I think everyone can look at this particular case especially and say an injustice occurred. We all saw it with our eyes, and we need to have accountability here. The police officer's job is to serve and protect the community, not to kill people on the street on video, particularly when they're doing something as minor as selling loose cigarettes.
Niger, you know, you were talking about the fact that you have been talking about some of these issues for a couple of decades. You've looked far too young, my friend.
Thank you.
But it's interesting, and it always, you know, I still think of myself as a young person. I'm far from it, but it is interesting to see that a lot of those faces in this movement are young. How important is the staying power going to be to making sure that this change does come, that we enact real change?
Well, first of all, I think it is very healthy that young people get engaged in the political process and you exercise their First Amendment rights. All that I would ask, though, is that we have a true and open dialogue. And I have to disagree with my friend, my colleague, my guest, because no, I don't think it's a distraction when you're talking about several thousand lives being lost versus 123, I believe the statistic is. It's not that those 123 lives are not precious. It's not that in the case of Staten Island and other cases we have problems that need real addressing. It's that if your focus is on life, if your focus is on what the crisis is among young black men. I saw Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson was here earlier. You remember years ago he said he was walking down the street late at night and he heard voices behind him and he was relieved that they were white men and not black men. There is a crisis of the image and projection of what a young black man is supposed to be in our society. And until we are brutally honest about it, we're not going to get anywhere.
Can we talk about this more and do it again here at this hour? I'd really like it if we could have the both of you back with us, because I think we've just sort of touched on the topic right now. Niger Innes, Zerlina Maxwell, thank you so very much for joining me here.